Hello and welcome to This Week in Travel. I'm your host Michelle Robson and editor of Turning Left for Less. This week I'm going to talk about mistake fares and also how to get to hotel status by buying it. I'm here at Terminal 5 at Heathrow in the British Airways First Lounge, which is for gold card holders, actually heading off on a mistake fare myself. So I'll be talking a little bit about what to look out for and what mistakes not to make.
So today I'm going to be looking at how you can get hotel status without actually staying in a hotel. The first thing I should say is you need to work out whether it's actually worth the money. It might sound like a good perk, but with some of them, quite often the upgrades are not guaranteed. So in fact, you could pay all the money and then not get the upgrades you were hoping to. And some of them actually don't have that much value. So you really need to do the maths about how many times you'd stay, whether you would normally actually pay for an upgraded room or whether you'd be happy with the base room anyway, and whether you get things like breakfast. And if you do you actually eat breakfast? So it's not necessarily a straightforward rule for everybody. So kind of look at how you travel and whether it suits you. The first one I'm going to look at is Intercontinental Ambassador. Now these perks are only valid at actual intercontinentals, but it does also come with IHG Platinum. It's a paid subscription service which you pay once a year and it costs $200, or if you collect IHG points then it's 40,000 points as an alternative way to pay. Now this is one of the schemes I actually use myself. I don't do it every year. I wait until I'm going to stay in an intercontinental and then I will generally buy it because I don't stay in that many intercontinentals. So for me it's not worth topping it up every year unless there's a specific offer on. The main reason I would normally buy this is because of the free night. It's a free weekend night that you get, and it's not quite as straightforward as it sounds. So you have to use a special rate for the other paid night. It's a minimum 2 night stay, 1 paid and then 1 free at a weekend. Weekend is normally Friday to Sunday, but it can vary in some Middle East places. So make sure you check before you sign up for it if that's what you're planning to do. So the rates that they use are at a unique rate. I'm not quite sure where they get it from. It's kind of closest to the flexible rate, but it's not even quite that. So there is a way to look at it beforehand. You can look at the actual rates, but honestly, if you can't be bothered with clicking on a special link, you can just do your research. And if you look at the flexible rate and look at what the advanced purchase rate, normally the free weekend night, paid night, is somewhere in between the two. So it gives you a rough idea. So my view is, say for example, I was looking at staying in Portugal, an intercontinental there, and there it cost about €400 a night. So for me, it's worth it because I'm staying at a weekend anyway, and I will pay the $200, which I guess is probably about £175. So it's cheaper than paying €400 for the second night. Yes, it's not actually free in that you've obviously got to pay for the ambassador status for a year, but it's in effect then giving you ambassador status because I would have just paid for the second night anyway, and now I get all the perks of ambassador for a year, and for me that's a good use of it. So if you're going to stay in an intercontinental and you don't mind perhaps paying slightly more for the paid night than you would have done on an advanced purchase, and obviously if the second night is $200 or more, then in effect it's no-brainer because you get the status and it hasn't actually cost you anything. So let's have a look at what you actually get with the ambassador status. So as well as getting the IHG Platinum status, which to be honest I don't particularly rate, don't really tend to get a lot from it, but I'll put a link in below that explains all the benefits, you do get some really good perks. But again, as I say, it all depends if you actually use them. So one of the ones I really like is guaranteed 4 p.m. checkout. Now, if you're flying anywhere generally from the US to the UK, for example, or the Caribbean, Middle East, there's lots of places where flights tend to go very late in the day, and then you're chucked out at 11 or 12, nowhere to put your luggage, can't have a shower unless they've happened to provide some. You know, it's a real pain on your last day. So having that guaranteed 4 p.m. checkout, I think, is really good. However, there is another way to do that, and that's by using the American Express Platinum card. So if you were to use that, then they do have the FHR hotels, which also give a guaranteed late checkout, but obviously it depends on which intercontinentals are included. They're not always included. But yeah, the 4 p.m. checkout I think is a good one. You get $20 worth of food and beverage credit, but it can only be used in certain ways in the hotel. I mean, to be honest, $20 is neither here nor there, certainly not really a great perk. It's not going to cover your breakfast in most places. And the other things you get are things like premium internet. You do get a guaranteed upgrade. Now, again, I think this is well worthwhile. The one time that I've used it recently when I had ambassador status, I upgraded from a basic room to a suite. So that was a very nice upgrade. I was very happy with that. So yeah, that can bring some good perks because it is guaranteed. You won't always know beforehand. It might be at check-in, but you will get your upgrade. So yes, that's one of the best perks for me. And you also get perks with Six Senses. You get similar perks with Six Senses, but you actually get breakfast free there. So if you're staying in a Six Senses, it's definitely worth looking at whether it would be worth paying the $200. If you're doing like a week in a Six Senses without breakfast included, then you could obviously look at whether getting ambassador status might help, because you get some other perks as well. But again, you might, if you're doing a shorter stay, probably wouldn't really be worth it, and you'd be better off looking at using someone like GTC, which are the luxury agents that I partner with, because they offer things like free breakfast and upgrades, etc. as well on certain Six Senses hotels. So again, it's always worth doing your maths about what you're actually going to use. Is it worth paying for the status? Credit cards are also a really useful way to get status, particularly if you're thinking about getting the credit card anyway. So the best one for this is the American Express Platinum card. So let's talk about the American Express Platinum card. Now, this does have a very hefty fee of £575 a year, but you do pay it monthly. It makes it a bit less of a sting to not have to pay it all in one go. However, it does come with 4 different statuses. Now, they're only mid-tier, all of them. So again, you need to assess, would you actually get the value out of it? Would you stay in all of them, or would you be better looking at doing something different because actually you'd only use one of them? So if we look at the first one, Hilton, for me, that's probably the most useful if you want to have breakfast, because you do get free breakfast included. In the US, it's slightly different because you get a cash credit against your account every day to use for food and drink. It doesn't have to be for breakfast, but the downside is it's quite a small amount. Sometimes it's as little as $15. And to be honest, in the US, even in a really cheap hotel, you're going to struggle to actually get your breakfast for that. So it just depends. If you're not a breakfast eater, actually in the US, it's probably better for you because you can buy a drink or a snack. The other things you get with it are late checkout, but unfortunately it's not guaranteed. You also get a room upgrade, not guaranteed. You get the bonus points, and also you can use the 5 for 4 feature of buying reward stays. So you in effect get your 5th night free if you're buying on points. So that's quite useful if you're saving up for something special. The next one is Marriott. Now, this is less useful, I think, because you don't get breakfast included. You do get late checkout till 2 p.m, and I normally find Marriott are pretty good about this. You get the bonus points as well, and you also get bonus points when you check in. You get to choose a free gift of so many points depending on the chain. Upgrades are available subject to space, but that's about it for Marriott Bonvoy. So don't think gold is particularly useful, but it's better than nothing. Melia is an interesting one because there's obviously not that many Melias in the UK, but they do have the Me in London and another Melia, the White House, as well as Inside, which is a brand of Melia hotels where there's one in Manchester and Newcastle, and I believe one more in the UK. So you could get some use out of it. It's probably more use if you go somewhere like Spain where they have a lot of resorts. Now, I quite like the Melia Gold. It doesn't technically give you upgrades, but I have actually had a couple of upgrades via Melia Gold. You do get something which I think is really useful. You get 3 vouchers for 20% off every year, which I find pretty useful, but obviously you could just buy in a sale, but then it has to suit you when you want to buy it. And you also get 2 for 1 on breakfast. So if you buy 1 breakfast, you can get a companion free. Another useful feature is the late checkout, which is 4 p.m. in cities and 2 p.m. at resorts. So that's quite a useful feature if you're likely to want a late checkout. So it's not a bad one. Obviously, Melia is a chain where there's not that many hotels, particularly when you go to the US, for example, to choose from. So it just depends on where most of your travels are, if you're likely to use it or not. The final status is with Radisson, and you get the premium status there, which gives you a couple of interesting perks. You get 10% off food and drink, which if you're staying in a Radisson in somewhere like Norway, any little bit helps because it's crazy expensive for food and drink. And you also get an upgrade as usual, subject to availability. The recent times I've stayed with Radisson, I've got absolutely nothing, so Obviously, it just depends on where you are and how many people have status. The final one's an interesting one where you can accept less points, which for me works because I don't stay in Radisson's that much, so I'm probably not likely to get many points to use on a stay. And then you actually get an increased discount as a status holder. So that's quite an interesting one if you're actually more interested in getting some money off. So my personal view with the American Express Platinum card is I wouldn't get it just for the hotel status, unless perhaps there's one particular benefit like Hilton breakfast that you think is going to save you a lot of money over the year. I'd be wanting a lot of other perks from the Platinum card, like collecting the membership rewards or perhaps the travel insurance. So you can definitely get your money's worth out of it, but I wouldn't say you can get it solely just from hotel status. So next, let's have a look at another credit card, and it's one that I hold, which is the American Express Marriott Bonvoy. Now, I actually really like this card because it's only £75 a year, which I think is pretty cheap. Again, I did go into detail on this recently, so I will pop in the link for the previous episode. If you missed that, you can catch up on exactly what it offers. But just to give a brief overview, you do get Marriott Silver status with it. Now, really, that's not worth anything. The only thing it's worth is getting a few extra points, but other than that, really wouldn't bother with it. But what it does give you that I really like is a way to then get more quickly to gold, and this is why I have the Marriott card, that and collecting the points. So you get 15 status nights every year, so in effect it reduces the number of nights you need to get to gold or platinum by 15 nights. So that's really useful for me because it means I only have to do 35 nights to get my platinum status instead of 50. So for £75, I think that's quite decent. And also you get the Marriott points when you spend money on it, and you get extra points when you actually spend with Marriott. And because I stay in a lot of Marriotts, for me it's well worthwhile. Now, Accor used to have a really good scheme that was the Ibis business card, which used to give you gold status in Accor. Now, unfortunately, that has gone now, and it's replaced by something that's not quite as good, but is worth considering if you do stay in a lot of Accor brand hotels. So it's the Accor Voyager card. It costs €199 a year. And it gives you enough status nights for silver. It doesn't really give you a lot apart from a welcome drink and late checkout subject to availability, but it's worth something. And the good news is the status nights you can put towards obviously getting gold or higher. So it's useful if you think you might achieve gold status or higher by using those status credits. But otherwise, I think €199 is quite steep. The one thing that it does give that might offset it is they give a 20% discount on the luxury brands and 15% discount on the mid-range brands. Not all of them, but you can see a list of them before you buy it. So if you're going to be doing a lot of Accor stays, it actually might work out worthwhile, because the €199, you might be able to save that back by using the 20% discount, depending on what sort of price hotels you stay in. So it's definitely worth considering this if you are staying at Accor hotels, because as I said, it will get you silver, which gets you at least a glass of wine or a beer in the bar, and it does mean that you're that much closer to getting the next status up. The final thing worth mentioning is something called Founder's Card. It's a bit like a credit card, like the Platinum American Express, but without the credit card. So you pay an annual fee of $595 because it's predominantly aimed at those in the US. However, it does come with some hotel status, which is worth mentioning. It comes with a lot of different benefits, which I'll just gloss over very briefly, but I'll put in a link below and you can have a look. So the things it comes with are things like discounts on car hire. You get TripIt Pro, which is an app that I use a lot that basically collates all your travel plans in one place. You get that free every year, and various different travel perks, such as discounts and special offers. One of the things for hotels I think is completely worthless because it gives you special perks at high-end hotels, but they're actually all the ones that you can get for free by booking through a luxury agent like GCC or using the American Express FHR program. So really it's of no benefit because you could get that free anyway. It does come with Hilton Gold. Personally, I don't value that at $595, but it's worth looking at the other benefits just to see whether you could get your money's worth out of it. It also gives you a Marriott status challenge. Now, this is to get platinum. I've done this in the past, and now I keep it up because I actually find the platinum status pretty good. It basically allows you to do 15 nights in 90 days at Marriott, and then you would get a platinum status for a year afterwards. So it's worth considering if you've got a lot of Marriott stays coming up, or you think you could book Marriott's if you've got a lot of hotel requirements over the next 90 days. I would say that the $595 fee is changeable. Quite often they do offers, so if you're not in a hurry, I would definitely have a look at it. If you put in your email address, and they'll keep sending you offers until perhaps you get one. Sometimes they've seen it as low as about $300, so definitely worth waiting if you're not in a hurry. It does come with some airline benefits, but they're pretty much all aimed at the US, so a lot of them have a requirement that you have to start in the US. British Airways is one of them. It gives up to 10% discount, but unless you live in the US, I think with some of those you're going to struggle to actually use them. Could be useful maybe if you wanted to do a one-way back from the US for some reason, like you could only get one way on miles, but other than that, as I said, it is predominantly aimed at those in the US, but I thought it was worth a mention because some people may be able to get some use out of it. I'm now at the very glamorous courtyard at Charles de Gaulle Airport on the first stage of my mistake fare. So I thought it was worth just having a quick chat about exactly what a mistake fare is. So I've actually positioned to Paris to pick up a £600 fare, which was out a few months ago, which was on One World and was flying pretty much from most major airports in Europe to the US. And I believe some places in Mexico and possibly even Canada. So I booked it when the fare was what we would say dying. So there wasn't a lot of choice, and I just booked pretty much randomly the last fare that I could see, which was Paris to New York. These fares are quite hard to find. Probably the only place you will ever see them advertised is perhaps on some blogs and also on Flyer Talk in the premium fares part of that. However, most people, including myself, do not publicise them, mainly for the reason that by the time I've written it up, it's probably gone. So there's a few rules about mistake fares, but first let's clarify what is a mistake fare. It's a fare that seems too good to be true, and it is because basically somebody's made a mistake. Quite often they've left a one off the front, or they've missed out the taxes. It's basically a fare that the airline did not mean to publicise and has come out inadvertently. So the first rule is don't talk about it. Don't tell everyone, don't put it on a blog, because the quicker the airline hear about it, obviously the quicker they're going to take it off sale. And definitely when you do buy it, do not phone the airline and ask, are they going to honour it? Because all you're doing is drawing their attention to it. If you do hear about a good mistake fare, if you want to book it, you've got to do it there and then, because generally they will last 1-2 hours a lot of the time, a little bit longer if you're lucky, but they pretty much go as soon as the airline realise it. If it's the middle of the night, you might have a bit longer, but generally as soon as the airline are aware, they will start pulling them off sale. So you've got to be quick. The next most important thing, and one of the reasons why I also don't write about them, is the fact that quite often the airlines won't honour them. There's no legal reason why the airline need to honour a mistake fare. The only way that you would maybe have some legal recourse, and I know in some countries people have challenged it and occasionally they win, but generally the only way you would have any chance of winning them honouring the fare would be if you could genuinely claim that you didn't know it was a mistake fare. Now for me on this one, it was £600 return in business class to the US. It's pretty obvious that is a mistake. It's not a proper fare. If it was that maybe £1,500, then I think you have more of an argument that it was a mistake. But you know, quite often most of these fares tend to be very obvious that it's a mistake. So if they decide to cancel it, you literally haven't got a leg to stand on. So that kind of brings me to another really important rule. Do not book anything, and I'll repeat this, do not book anything that is non-refundable in relation to the fare. Maybe when you get very close to it, if you booked it a long way out, you could think about it. So I've booked a couple of things in the last week, like tours and things that aren't refundable. But until that point, I did not book anything that I couldn't get my money back on, because you just don't know whether the airline's going to honour it, and they can take a considerable amount of time to make a decision on it. So recently there was an ANA one, and they took around about, I think, 3 or 4 weeks to decide on that. First of all, they said they were going to honour it, then they said they weren't sure, then they said they'd let everyone know by the end of the month.
And some people that booked to go almost straight away did manage to go, but most of them were cancelled. So you kind of have to be pessimistic and assume they're probably not going to honour it, and not be the sort of person that's going to stress about it, because it's really just not worth it. So I view it as a big gamble. You put some money on it. The worst that happens is you get your money back and you don't travel. So you're not going to be out of pocket, providing you follow the rules that I said earlier about not booking anything in relation to it that you can't get a refund on. So yes, it's a gamble. If you're the sort of person that can't cope with uncertainty and want to plan everything in advance, it's definitely not for you. If you can cope with taking a bit of a gamble and waiting to see what happens, then yes, you can get some amazing bargains. I've done one to the US from Vietnam for 16 hours in first class, return for about, I think it was £550. That was a particularly good one. I've done one from Edinburgh to Penang. I think that was about £700. Obviously this one, I think I've maybe done one other one. So yeah, they maybe come up a couple of times a year. I said, probably I'd say 50-50 they'll honour it at absolute best, probably less than that a lot of the time. But yes, it's worth, if you see it advertised somewhere, if you want to do it, don't hesitate, just do it, but don't stress about it and just forget about it for a while. And nearer the time, if it looks like they're going to honour it, then you can start thinking about booking some things. But again, nearer the time, maybe the last week or two, you could book something non-refundable, but it's always a gamble, whichever way you do it. But if you manage to get one, good luck and enjoy it like I'm going to. And I'll report back on what it's like flying with Finnair via Helsinki from Paris, and what I get up to in the US.
So that's all for this week. Next week, I'm going to be having a look at my favourite travel apps that I use when I'm travelling. I've mentioned one today, TripIt Pro, but I'll be talking about quite a few others that you might want to look at when you're travelling. Until then, happy travels.